Welcome to the Dynasty One podcast. I'm your host, Carl Safchik, and tonight I am joined by somebody who lives north of the wall with the wildlings and the White Walkers, and that is Jesse Patterson. How you doing tonight, Jesse?
I get the reference too because I'm a Game of Thrones fan. I like it. We're
you?
definitely up north, but I'm an episode behind, so don't ruin anything for me.
You're an Oh,
I hear there's some good stuff coming down though. I actually just caught up on 2 weeks ago's episode, so I was gonna watch them right straight through, but I know we got a show to do, and Dynasty One takes priority over Game of Thrones.
Absolutely. So you said you're one episode behind, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen yesterday's episode yet.
All right. Well, message me when you do. All right. So we got a big show. We got Leo Pasiga from DLF coming on a little later. He's going to talk about. We always have him on to talk about his notebook, but this time specifically, we're going to ask him about how he keeps a notebook on his league mates, specifically during training camp, how he sees them over or underreacting, and what he feels is the best way to react to training camp and preseason news. Before we get to him, before we get to news and notes, we had a few people leave reviews last week to get in Gerald Parker's league. We really appreciate that. We have a new way to drum up some reviews this year. Jesse is taking on the responsibility of commissioning the Dynasty One Fantasy Listeners League. So there's going to be a few of us from the Dynasty One team in it. We're going to bring over some of the people. We're definitely going to bring over the champion from last year from the RSO League. He'll definitely get a spot. So some familiar faces, but we're going to be giving out a few more spots to anybody who does a review this week. If you've done a review in the past, go ahead and, I don't think you even can submit another one. Go ahead and email us the review that you've already done, so it'll be fair to you. Maybe we'll give one to an old one to a new one. But if you haven't given a review, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Email us at dynastyOnefantasy@gmail.com. That's dynasty, the number one, fantasy@gmail.com. Leave us some reviews. And you know what? As we do most every year, I'll leave a running contest for someone who does the best meme or joke or Photoshop pertaining to the podcast or pertaining to the personalities on the podcast. That's been a hit in the past. We've seen some people come up with some really funny stuff.
That was great last year. I remember last year's submission was pretty awesome.
What was the winner last year? There was one that cracked me up.
Oh, it blew us all away. I'm gonna try to dig that up on Twitter, find that, and maybe retweet it on the Dynasty One account there, just so everyone kind of see what they're up against from last year.
Yeah, we'll find that from last year because that was some funny stuff.
You said the reigning champ, was that Jason last year that won the pool?
No.
Okay, just making sure.
I think you knew the answer to that before you asked. All right, so let's go over some news and notes. I mean, we definitely finally have some stuff to talk about, right? Actually, I didn't put this on the news and notes because it literally just happened like a few minutes ago or hour or two ago. Quincy Noon was done for the year. The Jets are going to have literally no one to pass to. Their best quarterback is 38-year-old Josh McCown. After that, I don't know about anything. They have Robbie Anderson as a wide receiver. They have Ardarius Stewart. Are you buying into Ardarius Stewart? Are you buying into anything in this offense, or is it like completely devoid of any talent in your opinion?
It's funny. I was just preparing for the show. I was going through some Roto notes and things like that, and I saw Pat Daughtry, Roto Pat, said he tweeted out the new depth chart of the Jets, and he has himself listed as a third wide receiver. So
yeah.
I mean, as of right now, that team is a hot mess, and I think I want no part of it, even from a dynasty standpoint. I mean, I guess eventually they'll start turning things around like Cleveland's starting to do, but I mean, you gotta wonder how tarnished some of these guys' reputation and value is going to be by the time they actually pull their heads out of their butts and turn around as an organization.
This could be one of the worst offenses in league history. Like if you adjust for era. It could be very, very bad. The one player that I don't hear talked about right now, even though he is hyped up every other year and legitimately has been having a good camp and legitimately has opportunity for targets, is Austin Seferian-Jenkins. There's little to no buzz about him right now.
No, I see nothing other than the the ASJ Truthers syndicate on Twitter, propping him up like they always do. But there's very few of those now. He's got the suspension to start the year, so I know that might lower his value a little bit. But I mean, you look at what they have going on there, and you look at a guy who's trying to recoup some sort of value to his career to prolong it, and he might be a great buy just because again somebody's got to catch some sort of passes in that offense.
All right, so moving on to the news and notes that are actually on the agenda for today. The Miami Dolphins have signed Colin Kaepernick. Wait, no one signed Colin Kaepernick yet.
No, the fans were upset about that. You even just mentioning that. So there's a bunch of angry letters coming in right now. I'm getting so.
I want Colin Kaepernick signed. That the joke wasn't about that he shouldn't be signed. Okay, anyway, they signed Jay Cutler to a 1-year, $10 million deal. In all likelihood, Ryan Tannehill's out for the year. How much are you pursuing Jay Cutler in 2 QB leagues, and what does this mean for Dolphins skill positions?
I think in terms of pursuing Cutler, you'd say as a free agent option, I would assume, because most people would have dropped him by this point. Even in 2 QB leagues, I don't imagine many people were hanging on hoping for this injury, and if they were, they're very smart owners, probably smarter than I.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like free agent dollars, or if he is in 2 QB leagues, maybe he's at the end of somebody's roster. What would you trade? What would you give up for free agent dollars?
You got to imagine it's a 1-year thing, if that. I mean, the Dolphins still haven't, officially IR'd Tannehill, so I could see a situation where they pop list him to start the year. Cutler comes in, he's not playing well, and he says, "You know what? I'm Jay Cutler. I degaff and kind of walk away again." So you got to imagine that anything you're paying for him is for hopefully a 1-year rental at best. So I don't know. I'd want to roster him for cheap, but I wouldn't be willing to, blow the bank in my fab budget or anything like that to get him.
Well, normally, in a lot of leagues, you have free agent fab budgets and then regular season fab budgets. So, me personally, if I'm in a 2 QB league, I'm probably spending 70%, maybe more on Jay Cutler. That's just me. It is a 1-year rental, but especially for a team out there that maybe is rostering like Jared Goff and Andy Dalton, like if those are your 2 guys, then I think it's definitely within the realm of possibilities that you're throwing big cash at the quarterback of an Adam Gaze's offense, and an offense that could be legitimately, top 18, top 15, I guess. I think that's at least reasonable to expect that type of upside.
There's certainly worse QBs in the league than him right now. We just talked about Josh McCown in the Jets. Yeah. I'd certainly rather have Jay Cutler than him.
Yeah. All right. Well, it seems inevitable at this point that Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver Martavis Bryant will be reinstated, and it's probably going to happen this week. We've talked about him recently, but where are you taking him in a dynasty startup, and what would you trade him for in a rookie draft? So, like, if he were the only – let's start with that. If he were the only – veteran available in a rookie draft, where would you draft him? What is the highest you would draft him?
The highest I would draft him? I'd take the big 4 running backs and definitely Corey Davis out of it. So I'm already down to the 6th pick, I guess. I am coming around on John Ross. You guys are talking me into him. So probably in the 7 or 8 spot, I'd look at Martavis. He's proven he can do it at the NFL level. He's certainly got some crazy upside there. And if you're giving me a coin toss between him and Mike Williams in Tampa, I'd have to really think hard about which one I want to take.
I would venture to believe. Now I'm looking at July ADP. Our buddy Ryan McDowell gave me a sneak peek of August ADP, but I didn't see where Martavis was going. And July ADP, he's going after Corey Davis, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. So essentially he'd be going 106. I'd be willing to bet in August, with all the buzz about him, like definitely being reinstated, I'd be willing to bet he's probably going to go probably like 104, 105 range. If we're just talking about dynasty startup comparing to rookie ADP, I'm willing to say I'd take him over anybody not named Corey Davis, Christian McCaffrey, and Leonard Fournette. And like, I'm not even a Martavis guy. I saw him go in a Roto World Dynasty Best Ball League with a bunch of experts. Our friend Denny Carter took him I think 209 overall. What do you think about that? I hear you
smart. Brand for Denny, though. I mean, he's long asserted that Martavis is the best wide receiver in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was very on brand. Actually, if you look at all the personalities in that Roto World draft, all the picks were on brand. It was very our friend Brian Malone has yet to pick through like 3 or 4 rounds, just trading for future picks, which he does. A lot of the guys are drafting the players that you would think that they would draft. But I don't think that it's I bet that I'm on the lower end. I know you have to be on the lower end to say that you wouldn't take him till 6 or 7. I just think trade value alone.
Oh, his trade value right now is probably, I would say, pretty close to at its peak based on, the hype coming in. If he comes in and has a couple of bad games, or just takes him a while sluggish to get back into rhythm with Ben, since you got to remember he hasn't practiced with him yet because he's still not reinstated, whatever the hell the league's doing with that. But so if he starts out slow, then you may have missed a bit of a selling window there to sell high on him.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be willing to bet that you'd be able to get like a 101 for him in some leagues. I'm not saying that would happen in every league. I do think in some leagues it could happen. Buffalo Bills have signed wide receiver Anquan Bolden to a 1-year deal. If you're a contender, what are you willing to give up for Bolden?
I'm confused at Bolden signing with Buffalo, to be honest with you. I thought he wanted to go from Detroit to a contender. To sign with Buffalo seems a little odd to me. But I mean, obviously the targets are there for the taking. He has no other similar players on that roster unless you count Charles Clay in the middle. And I think he's got a good path to red zone targets. I think he's got a good path to targets in general. If I'm a contending team, that's certainly the kind of guy I'd be targeting as a end of roster kind of fill-in guy to help me make a championship push.
Yeah, I think the $6 million had something to do with it. I'm guessing there were contenders that weren't really willing to give that. And also, on a less selfish note, or more selfish, whatever way you want to look at it, he's like right there on fringe Hall of Fame. So why wouldn't he want to go? Either if he could go somewhere and get a ring, that would obviously help, or if he could go somewhere and get a ton of targets, maybe catch 60, 70 balls, get close to 1,000 yards. I don't think he will, but he's probably trying to add on to that Hall of Fame resume, and I think he's right there on the border. He would be in my Hall of Fame, but it's going to be hard when he's competing with Steve Smith and Andre Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald and Calvin Johnson. He's right there as a fringe pro. What do you think about Zay Jones? Does this hurt his development?
I don't think so. I mean, Jones, he's going to be there long term, obviously, with them not extending Sammy Watkins or picking up his 5th-year option. I think they're going to give Jones every opportunity to prove that he can be, a future asset to that team and see what they have in him. So I can see him still having value short term, and then I can see him gaining value long term, even if Bolden's there for only 1 year.
Yeah, I'm buying Zay Jones right now, and if this gives you any opportunity to buy him a little bit lower, I would say go ahead and go out and buy Zay Jones as quickly as possible. Green Bay Packers running back Jamal Williams has been pushing teammate Ty Montgomery for starting reps. Which of the big three, we could count Aaron Jones with Jamal Williams and Ty Montgomery. Which of those three would you rather own in Dynasty? At their current ADP, obviously you could probably say I'd rather own Ty Montgomery, but I think he's the most expensive.
Yeah, I'm just still looking at July ADP here. I'm not as close to Ryan as you are, so I don't get the sneak peek at the August yet. Jamal Williams still coming in at 144 overall. I think you have someone who could step in and get really good numbers, really good touches in his first year in an explosive offense in Green Bay. So I think that's hard value to pass up right there. Aaron Jones seems to be falling behind even some other guys. Although it's early in camp, I don't really take a lot of stock into what's going on just yet. I want to see how preseason games roll out and see how their usage goes there. But I think Jamal Williams is the guy to own there. I happen to own him in your home league too, I think. So.
Yeah, I thought it was odd that Aaron Jones was selected, I think, 2 rounds after Jamal Williams. And like draft Twitter and metrics Twitter was like, saying, well, there's the next starter. Like, don't even bother with Jamal Williams. It's the Aaron Jones show now. Well, the team that drafted those two didn't think that, and that's not what's being evident right now. So I think it kind of goes in order, even with taking value into account. I think I'd rather own Ty Montgomery, and then after that, I'd rather own Jamal Williams. But really, I'm not buying any of those three because it's a great offense. I don't know if any of them are the Eddie Lacy workhorse, the Amon Green workhorse. I know that was pre-Aaron Rodgers, but still, I don't know that's what we're going to see there. So I'm avoiding it mostly, but if I had to buy somebody, it would be Ty Montgomery, and I won't fault anybody for buying Jamal Williams. Really quickly, we've seen every camp report regarding Bengals running backs. We've seen that Gio is going to get a ton. Obviously, we've heard a lot about Joe Mixon. One came out this week that Jeremy Hill was going to be the starter. How do you view this shaking out?
I view this shaking out as a headache all season long for fantasy owners. I mean, at least at the start of the year for sure. Marvin Jones, you guys have mentioned it on this podcast before, actually, that Marvin Jones is very hesitant to start rookies. I don't know if he doesn't want to break something new because he knows how cheap the owner is there and doesn't want to smash his new toy. But I could see it starting out very frustrating for fantasy owners who drafted Mixon high. I could see it starting out frustrating for guys who think that, hey, Gio is going to be this, third down Theo Riddick type back, and he'll still get his. And I could see it being frustrating for Hill owners who, hung on hoping that he'll keep his value, and then Mixon all of a sudden explodes onto the scene, and he's rendered useless by week 3 or 4. So if I can, I'm staying away. Until it kind of clarifies itself a little better later in the season.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there at the end. I'm hoping it's just on my end. Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Let me turn down my bandwidth. Just do audio only. Yeah, I think it's going to be a headache too. I'm not buying into any of them in Dynasty right now. Maybe Jeremy Hill really late. I know that's kind of inappropriate to say in some circles because everybody thinks Jeremy Hill is the worst player ever. But I think that he does hold some value considering how late he is going in fantasy drafts. All right, I have some ADP twins fresh off the presses. These are from August DLF ADP, which isn't even out yet. First one that I have here is Jordan Howard and Devonta Freeman, both with an 18.8 ADP. Who would you rather own in Dynasty?
I'm going with Freeman on this one. I just think he's established his value. He's on a high-powered offense. He's playing for a contract, although that doesn't always work out the best for certain people. But I think Freeman's the guy to own here. I like Howard's rookie season. I think what he did was fairly incredible for a 5th-round pick. I'm hoping that Paul Perkins does the same thing this year. I'm worried about that Chicago offense in general. I'm worried that there's some regression coming for Howard, and I think Freeman's value is pretty much going to stay steady from this year to next year, whereas Howard could take a value hit, and then I'm left kind of holding the bag on him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'd rather have Devonta Freeman, especially in PPR. Freeman's probably going to get that big contract. Tevin Coleman will be there through the end of his contract, but we've seen that not hurt Freeman so far. It's just a much better offense. Jordan Howard did impress me, though. I mean, much like you, and he's only 22 years old, so Jordan Howard could have a big career ahead of him. Even though I do usually go the 0 running back, these are two guys that I will at least consider late in the 2nd round in Dynasty drafts. All right. How about late in the 3rd round of Dynasty drafts? Dalvin Cook and Demaryius Thomas.
I love DT. I can't give up on Demaryius. That guy's and
you just hate Vikings players.
And I hate the Vikings, so I'm definitely not going to pick someone from my own team. I mean, Cook's from everything I'm reading. I'm not obviously in Minnesota, despite the fact that Canada and Minnesota are right beside each other, according to you. I'm not there at training camp watching what's going on, but Cook's getting a lot of good hype. But Demaryius Thomas has just been, bulletproof in fantasy for a number of years, and I think he's the kind of guy that you get in the 3rd, 4th round, and you just plug him in and play him, and know you're going to be getting good value out of him all the way through.
Yeah, I love Demaryius Thomas, and this is tough for me because I think a year from now, almost no matter what happens, you're going to be looking at a player with a higher ADP in Dalvin Cook. But I just love fantasy points. I just love winning in fantasy. It's just this weird thing that I have where I just really am obsessed with outscoring my opponents. It's weird. It's really weird. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a unique situation you're doing right there.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with Demaryius Thomas. How about teammates? Teammates playing the same position with the exact same ADP. This will be interesting. Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram at 75.3.
Oh, the old New Orleans backfield. Although we're missing my old favorite player in the league, Adrian Peterson. I guess he's must be farther down the list.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
I like Ingram here, although I can see Kamara gaining some value over the season. Someone between Ingram or Peterson is going to have a very good fantasy season out of that backfield. It may take an injury to one or the other for that to happen, but I think Ingram has more upside short term at that draft position than Kamara has, and I'd take that.
All right, I agree. Again, go 3 for 3 with you. I'd rather have Ingram, but I like Kamara long term. Ingram is just completely all around great back. I'm hoping he goes somewhere in 2018 where he is respected by his coach.
Or Sean Payton moves on, perhaps. He could be respected in New Orleans still.
Yeah, sure. Could see him going somewhere like Oakland, something like that. Maybe even Pittsburgh if Lev Bell doesn't re-sign there. All right, last one, and then we're going to get Leo on. Evan Ingram and Cam Newton at 93.2.
Geez, that's a bit of a tougher one. I don't particularly like Ingram in terms of landing spot and his fit in that offense. But Eric Carter was actually tweeting about him the other day and said that there's a reason that the Giants drafted him is they envision him getting targets. They envision him fitting somewhere in that offense. But I'd probably still go with Cam here because where are we? 9th round, I guess, at this point if we're in 93.
8th, I think.
8th or 9th round. I'd start looking at a quarterback maybe around there if Cam's still available. I might go with Cam there.
I think Cam is an elite option that you can get super late. I've said many a times how I don't see the possibility for targets for Evan Ingram in that offense. And I've said before how I do like Cam, so I'm going to take him. All right. Well, everybody, again, please. What's that?
Even with Sterling Shepard being injured as he has in training camp here?
He said that he's actually going to be playing in the preseason.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
All right. Well, let's take a little break. Everybody, please rate, review, subscribe, get involved in the Dynasty One Podcast Listeners League. And in just a second, we're going to be joined by Leo Pasiga of DynastyLeagueFootball.com. What's up, Leo?
How you doing, bud?
Good. You might need to turn up your volume a little bit. Can you hear him good, Jesse?
A little quiet on my end, too.
All right, so let me
there
see
we go.
what I can do. Is that better?
Yeah, whatever you did. Did you just get closer to the mic?
Yeah, that's all I did.
It's all right. I think Shane can adjust it if...
Yeah, he's done it with mine before, too, because I was leaning too far back from my microphone.
Yeah, I know. I know Jason always told us, like, it's easier to turn somebody up than to turn them down.
Yeah, let me see if I can...
You're good right there if you just speak it to the microphone like that.
Okay, well, I got a headset on, so I'm not going to be moving my mic at all.
Oh, okay. Well, you sound good right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear him fine now.
How you been, buddy?
I'm good.
Did you settle on a tattoo artist yet?
Nope, I'm still working on it. My main goal right now is just to get my sugar to a point where I'm comfortable going back in under the gun for a little while because that diabetics really got to be careful when they get tattoos. And I'm lucky that I didn't get completely screwed over with all the ink I've gotten in the past because I was, I guess, a diabetic a lot longer than I realized.
I didn't know that about you, man. I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's all good, man. My everything's good. So
good.
I mean, I've dropped 50 pounds so far. So.
Wow, amazing.
Yep.
All right. Well, hey, I have an auction that I need to like literally be in the room for at 7:00. So we're gonna bust. Right. We're gonna do about 20-25 minutes with you, and then I got to run.
All right, that works.
All right, cool. All right, now we're joined by Leo Pasiga of DynastyLeagueFootball.com. Good friend of ours, longtime friend of mine. How you doing tonight, Leo?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. Great to have you on. So it's kind of cliche, the topic that we picked, but I mean, it is something to talk about every time we come on because it is an underrated and underutilized tool of the Dynasty community, and that is your Dynasty Notebook. Let me have you describe exactly what that is, and then what we're going to do is we're going to apply it to this time of year.
So what I've been doing for a very long time is I've been tracking owners in my leagues because I think that tendencies really become evident over time. And when you're playing Dynasty, you're in it for the long haul. So I'm constantly documenting negotiations that take place, how certain owners draft, whether they evaluate players the same way I do, whether they negotiate roughly the same way I do, whether they watch the waiver wire, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are. And that way I'm able to kind of just really know who I'm up against on a weekly basis and over from year to year in Dynasty. And I'm able to try to use that to my advantage.
All right. So using that at this time of year specifically, do you see a tendency of owners to underreact, overreact? Are you keeping track of which ones do what? Are you like the ones that underreact? Are you buying players for them that are getting hyped up by the coaches, and those who overreact, are you trying to sell them some of the puff piece players?
Yeah, so I got to be careful because I don't want to do a data dump on you guys and just, monopolize the entire airwaves here. But when it comes to the notebooks, I really think it's an underutilized and a really valuable tool. And so with training camp, what we see is anything that happens in training camp can be a trade catalyst, whether we're talking injuries, whether we're talking performance, good, bad, positive, negative. It's all a trade catalyst for your leagues. And I think the key for me with the notebooks is I need to identify the owners who overreact. I also need to identify the owners who don't necessarily overreact, but they simply react in real time and they react in a common sense fashion. And then I have to kind of figure out which owners in my leagues don't react at all in real time, and they're kind of slow to positive curves or negative curves. And by being able to isolate those owners, it gives me negotiating tools, and it puts me in a position where I know which doors to knock on. And I think there are two distinct separations here, whether we're talking about injuries or we're talking about performances. Even though they're both trade catalysts, I do think it's a different dynamic for which one we're looking at. And to go a little bit further, let's say we were looking at injuries. Let's take Anunwa today because it happened today, right? So let's take a look at that. So from an injury perspective, I could either be looking at buying value, like if I wanted a Robbie Anderson or if I was interested in our Darius Stewart, I could look at this as an opportunity and I could look to see is there an owner that overreacts to that. Or maybe I'm just looking to fill that void. Maybe I've lost Anunwa, or the owner that has lost Anunwa is somebody who likes to react quickly when they have an injury sustained on a roster to somebody that could contribute during the season at some major minutes and some major points. I might be able to move a player on my roster to fill that void if I know that window's usually open and I can go get on that right away.
All right, so I'm going to ask both of you guys, and I'll start with you, Jesse. What is the correct way to react? Are you one of the people that that uses the training camp and the beat writer performance pieces? Do you use that a lot? Do you use that in the way that you rank your players, or do you largely just say training camp's training camp, and until the regular season comes, I'm not going to give any of this stuff any credit?
Well, first off, Leo, great to be able to talk to you on air here. I've been following you for a little while there, and your notebooks actually helped me out in terms of the way I approach my league and my league mates now. As far as the training camp, the flood of information that we've been getting, and beat writers are dropping conflicting reports on different players multiple times a day. I try to keep up with it in terms of seeing gauging which players are getting hype, which players are getting a lot of puff pieces, and then like Leo mentioned, kind of use that and gear it towards the different owners in my league, see where I can find or sell at value different players based on how things are going in camp. Personally, I know a lot of what's going on, especially the positive news that comes out in training camp. A lot of that is to, puff up players, get their confidence going. So I kind of take it with a grain of salt myself. I don't form too positive an opinion or too strong an opinion based on something I'm reading out of training camp, but I do use it, like Leo mentioned, to kind of gauge the rest of my league.
Leo, Jesse brings up a good point. Some of these coaches, they will use one player who they think reacts positively to positive, to positive, telling them they're doing well. And some players react well to telling them that they're doing shitty. They find motivation in different ways. So how do you react to some of these training camp reports?
Okay, so basically what I would do, for me, this time of year and with the rosters in dynasty leagues, it's all about finding guys that I can stash on my roster, because very rarely are you going to get somebody that's going to, blow the doors off and come out of nowhere and surprise the entire league. So I'm looking for a guy that I can stash on my roster. I'm looking for three things. I'm looking for buzz, training camp buzz. I'm looking for a lack of obstacles to playing time, and I'm looking at cost. How much is it going to cost me to get this player? I think it's very important with training camp buzz, and my son, I talk about him quite a bit on Twitter. He's in the Coast Guard. He spends a lot of time with nautical navigation, and he has to triangulate certain points on the map. And I kind of, to me, this is kind of the same thing, right? You have to kind of triangulate whether or not the buzz you're getting out of training camp is accurate. And so what I usually like to do is I like to have several sources that I trust, that I've built, not necessarily a relationship, but just a level of accountability with, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's just an online website or a particular beat writer that covers a team. And I like to be able to have multiple sources and just kind of pair up those reports against one another and see if it all comes out the same in the wash, or are there some discrepancies. And those discrepancies will often lead me to believe that it's more of a fluff piece than necessarily actually what's taking place at training camp.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. One thing that I will say, just as far as if I had to pick one side, and obviously we're dealing in shades of gray, not black and white, but if it was one, do people normally overreact, or two, do people normally underreact to training camp? I would say personally that I just think that people do normally underreact to training camp. We only have finite amount of information to get about these players, and mostly during the spring and summer, there's nothing new to learn about these players. Now we have a lot of writers that go over some of these advanced metrics, and there are stuff that you can learn through reading, stuff like that, but there just isn't the information. We're not learning something new like we are during training camp. But I'll move on to some specific training camp battles. And Leo, I was wondering, what are some specific battles you wanted to look after this season?
There's so many things I'm interested in, and where it's tough with training camp battles is that so many times our bias gets involved. And I know if you're just strictly a metrics guy, that might be a little easier to move out of that, but I'm not, and my bias gets involved more often than it should. And I'll give you a quick example. I was thinking about this right before I came on, because I was on Twitter and I was looking at some of the hype that was going on today, and hopefully this isn't too far off your point, but a comparison to me is somebody like Devin Funchess and Braxton Miller. Both of them are in positions that they should see an increased role. Both of them have positive hype coming out of training camp. One I'm very interested in acquiring, and in fact, the last article I wrote for DLF, I basically had a section on getting Funchess, only turning 23 in this past May, somebody that I still want to take a shot on, versus Braxton Miller, who's had, again, a large amount of hype, very positive. Fuller being injured creates an opportunity for him to get more playing time, yet I see a wide receiver that fights the ball from the second it leaves the quarterback's hands all the way to his body. So it's a question of, with these training camp battles, it's not necessarily even battles on the same team. It's battles of similar quality players or valued players, and I only have one roster spot or two roster spots. Who do I want to take a chance on and go after? So that was just a thought that I had right before I came on. I didn't mean to stray too far off your question, but that was just something that I was thinking about before I came on.
Jesse, are there any specific battles that we haven't talked about yet today that you're keeping an eye on?
There's a bunch of one thing I did want to mention, just getting back to your previous point about training camp and what we can learn from it. Another thing is that, I mean, coaches are they're under no obligation to show much in terms of preseason games and training camp towards what they're going to do in a regular season. So while everyone's out there, they're getting their positions, they're learning their routes, and with their roles on the team, the coaches are under no obligation to show how they're going to utilize these guys during the season. So say, for example, the Ravens backfield. I mean, we don't know what kind of role everyone's going to have back there, and there's no obligation for Harbaugh to really show it in preseason games, because then it would tip his hand as to what they're going to do during the season, allow teams to plan for it.
But that's true. Yeah, what's crazy too is just the way guys come out of nowhere, and we're so caught unaware. I mean, think about the hype that's come out just this last week about Aguilar in Philadelphia. I mean,
that is exactly what I was about to bring up. Go ahead.
Everybody has been so focused on Matthews going back to the slot and having two dominant wide receivers, or potentially dominant wide receivers that can play on the outside. Torrey Smith drawing safety help over the top because of his speed. Maybe not necessarily a dominant player, but at least draw defensive attention. And Jeffrey can be that dominant player. So Matthews was in a position to really rake up a lot of targets and potentially be a great PPR third wide receiver to have on your roster. And now all of a sudden it looks like, between his tendonitis and the way Aguilar has been playing in camp, out of nowhere. I mean, are we looking at this year's Devontae Adams, somebody that we all swung and missed on, the last 2 years, somebody that was just an afterthought that we added to these deals, or, when we were trading, he was just an afterthought, somebody we didn't even worry about moving. Aguilar could be that same type of player this year, comes out of nowhere and ends up being a key factor in your fantasy football success.
Jordan Matthews is going 78 in July DLF ADP, and Nelson Aguilar is going for, wait for it, 256 overall. So I'm assuming that gap is closing, but I would be maybe buying Aguilar before the hype gets too out of control. And I do think he was already a candidate for the Devontae Adams of 2017 before we started hearing about this, and now we're hearing about it, and it could happen. We could see this happen. And not to say that Jordan Matthews won't be involved at all, but it's definitely going to cap his upside at the very least.
He's also a candidate to be traded now too. You never know what they're going to do with that.
Yeah, well, you know what? If Jordan Matthews gets traded, it'll be the same thing that happened with Dorial Green-Beckham last year. Everyone will say how it's a good thing, how he just needs to get an opportunity with a different coach, and somebody will treat him better. That's what's going to happen. Jesse, do you have any other that you're looking at this year? We talked about Eagles wide receivers. We've talked about Broncos quarterbacks in the past. What about I'll ask both of you. What about Seahawks wide receivers? We've had Jermaine Kearse start almost every game each of the past 3 seasons. We have Paul Richardson, who played better at the end of last year and in the playoffs. We have Tyler Lockett, who's coming back from a knee injury, who's been cleared to practice. We have the guy, and I always get his name wrong. Who was the rookie? I always get his name. Darboh. Amora Darboh, who I just recently wrote about, who I think is going completely under the radar. And in fact, in July, he was not drafted in a single DLF mock draft, not a single one. So talk about under the radar. This is a 3rd-round guy with a good shot, with a good opportunity to start. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Leo, who has a clear path to starting. Jermaine Kearse isn't good. Tyler Lockett has been up and down and suffered a devastating knee injury. And Paul Richardson has been a disappointment. So we're looking at a player with a clear path to relevance. You have Doug Baldwin in the slot. You have Jimmy Graham from the tight end position. A dynamic young quarterback, and Russell Wilson doesn't have much else to throw to. If he can separate himself from some of these mediocre wide receivers, I think there's some opportunity there.
I think it goes back to the three things we talked about earlier when it comes to this time of year. It's buzz. Is there positive buzz about this player? And there absolutely is. He's shown well so far in training camp. Is there a lack of obstacles to playing time? Absolutely. The guys you just mentioned don't scare anybody really. And what's the cost? And right now he's relatively free. In most dynasty leagues, you can probably get him off the waiver wire, if not free, for very minimal bid dollars. So I think that if out of all those wide receivers, other than Baldwin, the one that I would want to have rostered and take a shot on is Darbo.
What do you think about that wide receiver core, Jesse?
Yeah, I can certainly see Darbo getting value this season and beyond, especially if Lockett can't get back and get right. He's I'm not even sure if he's fully cleared for training camp at this point, is he?
I think he just got cleared maybe 2 days ago.
So he's still got that tantalizing tease of athleticism, but he's never really shown it on the field yet. So yeah, I can certainly see a scenario where Darbo gets some looks, earns some trust from Wilson, and becomes a viable fantasy weapon this year.
All right, and last one for me. I mentioned earlier, reason we're going to cut a little short today. Got an auction I'm going to be taking part in here in just a couple minutes. Just got done doing a guest spot with Jake Seeley on Fantasy Sports Radio. So we're going to do a little bit of a shorter version. Leo, let's talk about all the different skill positions in Tampa Bay. Well, I always say in Tampa Bay. That's one of the only places that you can't say in Tampa Bay, because there is no Tampa Bay. There is no city called Tampa Bay. It's just in Tampa. So let's talk about the skill position players in Tampa. You have Doug Martin, who by all reports is having a hell of a camp. He has 3-game suspension coming up. You have Charles Sims. You have Jeremy McNichols. You have
Jaquiz Rogers.
Yeah, Jaquiz Rogers, who looks like he might be in line for the bulk of the carries in the first three games. And then at the tight end position, you have O.J. Howard, but Cameron Brate played awesome last year. And then you have Chris Godwin, who I don't know how they're going to get him on the field, but supposedly he's having a great camp. How do you see this offense playing out in 2017?
Man, I wish I knew. Right? That's the $1 million question. I mean, it's really, I think it's an offense that I want to have shares in. I think it's an offense that's definitely going to score points, but hitting and missing on which guys you want to have, that's a difficult proposition. Obviously, you want Evans. Obviously, in best ball, you want to have Djax because of the explosive nature of his game. But in Dynasty, if I'm, it's tough in Dynasty. If I'm investing and I'm looking at this offense over the long haul, then really I'm going to try to grab McNichols and I'm going to try to grab Godwin, because I'm not going to probably be able to afford Evans. And those are the two guys that I can see 3 years down the road, 2 years down the road, really, really being impactful players. And I want to get a couple of those shares. Now I may plug a Brate in, and I don't know if I can afford O.J. Howard right now in dynasty circles. He's a kind of guy with being a tight end, and sometimes tight end struggle, especially with Brate there. He's a guy I'll probably look to acquire towards the end of the season if he's underperformed a little bit. But as far as guys that I can afford right now, if I don't have shares in that team, the two I'm going after are McNichols and Godwin.
Now, you said obviously you want Mike Evans. Do you want Mike Evans as the second overall dynasty pick?
He's definitely in the top 3 or 4 for me still. Do I want him second overall? If I had that pick in a startup, I haven't done a startup yet this year. If I had that pick in a startup, that would be a difficult choice for me. I would still probably lean Evans, and I would still probably go in that direction. Yeah.
I just, with all those, our friend Rummy uses the phrase syrup over pancakes, which means to say that, with all these different weapons in Tampa, that probably the quarterback is the one to own. Mm-hmm. I don't see a scenario in which Mike Evans leads the league in targets again. And let's be honest, he's in fantasy, he's reliant on targets and touchdowns. Now, he's got targets because he's been the only option there. And he's got touchdowns 2 out of 3 years. In 2015, I think he only scored 2. I don't see paying that price for a guy whose upside is capped by efficiency. So I'm not buying him. I do see myself buying Godwin. I do see myself buying Doug Martin just because in a lot of leagues, people aren't treating him as though he's the starter. I love O.J. Howard, but I'm with you. I don't think right now is the time to buy. And Brait is just being completely overlooked. Jesse, do you want to add anything to the Tampa situation?
I mean, I agree with most of the stuff you guys are saying, especially Godwin. I think he's got a huge opportunity to establish himself as a future weapon in that offense. You can't imagine Deshaun's going to be there for very long. Same thing with the tight ends. I think Brait's a good value right now, and then O.J. Howard, you wait until Brait lowers his value a little bit this year, and then hop on him in the offseason or something.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Leo, man, thank you so much for coming on. I had to schedule this like 3 years in advance. Leo is such a busy guy.
Not only busy, but kind of a podcast recluse too when it comes to making these appearances. But I was happy to get some time with you guys. I really enjoy coming on your show.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Well, you could find Leo's work at dynastyleaguefootball.com. You could follow him on Twitter at, I should probably have this up before I start saying it, at Siga_FF. The reason I don't remember it is because you changed it a couple years ago.
I did. That's correct. When I disappeared for about a year and then came back. Yep.
Yeah. Well, everyone's happy to have you back on Twitter and have you back in the community. You can follow Jesse at DF_Patterson. As always, follow me at Carl Safchik. Go rate, review, subscribe to the pod. We want to see your reviews. You can email them at dynasty1fantasy@gmail.com. That's dynasty, the number 1 fantasy@gmail.com. And send us some funny memes, some funny GIFs, Photoshop our faces, do something fun, and the one that makes us laugh the hardest will give you a spot in the New Listeners League. All right, thank you, everybody, and have a good week. All right, guys, I got to get downstairs and get ready for this auction.
All right, good luck, man.
Yeah, good luck, Carl. Nice talking to you, Leo.
All right, take care, fellas.
See you.